Well, thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to be here. But as usual, Stephen is being far too modest because what many of you will know is that behind the scenes, Stephen is quite a mover and shaker in science policy in the House, and he was very pivotal in ensuring that we managed to get that evidence from Tim, making sure that he chivied all the right people to get that downlink. And it was a true inspiration for many of the young people who were at that evidence session. And what you also don't know is that today almost didn't happen. Because there was a lot of problems behind the scenes in making sure that we managed to get the rooms in place and the administration worked. And Stephen worked tirelessly to make sure that we could, in fact, still have this event today at such an important time in the calendar. And so I think that we should actually thank him now for the sleepless nights which he's put in place to make sure that today could happen. Let's thank Stephen. You know, at any other time, I would be standing here to give you an in-depth account of progress so far on the Science and Technology Committee. Understandably, we have other things on our minds today. It does feel like we've got through a lot since we last met. So before I get into the referendum, which I am going to talk about, I would like to just bring you up to date a little bit on the work of the committee. I stood here last year and I joked that the job of our committee is to scrutinise all government policy based on evidence or research, and that is all government policy. And I said that as a result, our great challenge would be discerning signal from noise. And it wasn't a joke. It has been a great challenge. So to try and narrow things down, we've channeled our work into 5 work streams: money, data, the 8 great technologies, emergencies, and pre-legislative scrutiny. But we have got our priorities right. We started with money, and we never let the issue drop. Our science budget report made the case for protecting science funding in the spending review and for a long-term roadmap to increase private and public R&D investment up to 3%. And we followed it up with hearings and seminars and stern letters to the Chancellor proposing key measures to deliver this outcome. We've had some success, and we've protected headline budgets. We've seen PhD candidates exempted from the skills charge, and we've seen reforms to the capital gains tax regime to encourage longer-term investment in research. But we do believe that there is more that needs to be done, and we will continue to pursue the need to have a long-term upward trajectory in government investment in science and innovation, not just in the science budget proper, but also in the departmental budgets, which sometimes get forgotten in this debate. And we also believe that there need to be better incentives and simpler regulatory structures to stimulate private sector investment. We think that's going to become ever more important in the current climate. We also went on to publish a set of reports around digital issues. The big data dilemma, which has led to the government agreeing to set up a Council of Data Ethics, pre-legislative scrutiny of the Investigatory Powers Bill, which led to changes to the bill which is now being considered in the Lords, and the digital skills crisis, which has made key recommendations ahead of the government's upcoming digital strategy. And our 8 great technologies series, it did start with the big data report, but it's moved on to space and satellites, which reported just before Tim Peake came back. Regenerative medicine and AI and robotics are now our current inquiries. And space and the robotics inquiries will also serve as pre-legislative scrutiny for the upcoming modern transport bill, which is going to set out the regulatory framework for driverless cars and the proposed spaceport. While in our science and emergencies work stream, while we inevitably started by looking at the quality of science advice in Ebola, we've now moved on to CBRN, and we're still considering the implications of Zika in an environment that is incredibly fast-moving. And finally, we're also running standalone inquiries into science communication, which started off with an embarrassingly pun-filled session into NERC and the public engagement value of Boaty McBoatface. Yes, we asked if the Minister was going to have to walk the plank. And of course, we're running a seminar series on the higher education white paper and bill to help strengthen the consultation process and inform debate on these reforms throughout the House, and we are reporting on that on a regular basis, and there are public documents that you can have a look at. But as I said, in normal times, this would be the substance of our discussion today, and I would go into excruciating detail about the issues our inquiries have raised, particularly in the direction of the science budget and the higher education bill. But that is going to have to wait for another day. I'm sure that each and every one of you here is devastated to hear that. We need to talk about Brexit. We need to talk about the implications. You've heard from the Minister. I hope that you found his words reassuring. Like me, I'm sure that many of you, if not most of you, were fervent Remainers and will have shared my shock that despite the clear evidence of the economic and diplomatic damage it risks, the majority voted for Brexit. Most, if not all of you, will be directly affected by EU funding, by collaboration, by free movement implications of the negotiation which is coming, and you must be deeply anxious in the face of this uncertainty. Many of you, I'm sure, feel angry and bewildered about the potential impact this process is going to have on UK science and innovation. Now, I understand that. I even share a lot of those emotions, but I do not believe that rending our garments, even if it's cathartic, is going to protect the world-class science and innovation ecosystem that all of us have worked so hard to build up in the United Kingdom. In the last 5 years, we've been through some difficult times, and we've proven that where we have a stable and united government, Britain is a strong and adaptable country, and we can withstand economic shocks and social challenges on a big scale. We are emerging from what has been a bruising and debilitating debate. It's divided communities, it's divided parties, it's divided families, and it is going to require extraordinary leadership from all parties to take us through this and to the other side. But I do have confidence that we can rise to that challenge, not only because we are going to have to, but also because our history has shown us to be a resilient and determined nation who do far more than survive adversity. We have always come out stronger. This is a moment, I think, where we have to take a deep breath. We have to remind ourselves that we will be okay. It doesn't feel like that right now, I don't think, but I think we have to use a bit of logic and rationality as we look at it. I think much of the campaigning has been over the top. I don't think the outcome is going to be as bad as the Remainers said, and I do not think it is going to be as breezy as the Leavers said. The measure of the referendum, though, is not going to be in the outcome. It's going to be in how we respond as a nation. There is no time now for personal ambition. There's no time for partisan politics, and there is no time for self-pity. This is going to take the best of our resilience, our whole concentration, and our collective wisdom of our finest minds, many of whom are in this room today. And as we emerge, quite dazed, I think, into what will be a different chapter in our history book, we need to reflect hard on what the British people said, many of them disenfranchised, whether it's financially, educationally, or politically, for all sorts of different reasons. And we must know that this vote was not about the shape of our bananas, and it wasn't about what goes into our sausages, and I don't think it's right to mistake it for a vote for isolationism or a retreat from the world. I don't think that's fair. I don't think Trump has a fifth column in Sunderland. There's a lot of analysis which is still to come, but I've heard two core messages that came out from this vote with a little bit of help from an ex-diplomat from Lebanon who have quite a lot of experience with political division. The first is the public, as ever, are worried about the current levels of immigration. They're worried it's going to affect the character and economic prospects of the UK. Now, we can all point to our island history as one that is essentially shaped by waves of immigration that has progressively shifted the character of our nation. And we can reel out evidence about the importance of immigration to growth, especially in key sectors where specialist skills are in short supply. But in response, many still fear that there is no system that is strong enough to manage the implications of migration for our schools and our health services and our communities. And it is a stalemate that has paralysed political debate for most of our living memories. The vast majority of Britons, I do not believe, are intolerant or racist, but the failure to neutralise the migration debate is leading to increased intolerance and racism. It may be, it just may be, that a Brexit scenario leads to a more flexible interpretation of free movement, and that may be part of the answer at last. I am sceptical, though, that that alone will be the solution. I believe we need to think much more creatively about how to build a 21st century policy on migration that helps us promote and benefit from our openness and diversity, especially in our science and innovation sectors, but doesn't harm our infrastructure or fracture our politics. The second message which I heard, and which has been talked about a lot, is that we don't like our decisions being taken further away from us. We have a growing distrust of authority and a desire to claim greater influence over our lives. Power is moving towards technologically empowered individuals and away from 20th century regional and national power structures. So how do we replace these structures with checks and balances which have their own strengths and weaknesses, and replace them with new models that promote our best instincts and values and not our worst? And how do we engage the public in decisions in the future and overcome the growing cynicism and disengagement from the establishment, who must inevitably implement those decisions? To put it another way, how do we stop every decision coming down to a vote against the establishment rather than a sober assessment of the evidence in question? I don't have an immediate answer to that question. I'm throwing it out into a room filled with finer minds than my own. I only observe that for the sake of our democracy, this is a crisis of confidence that we must waste no time in solving. And I gently suggest that given the nature of the problem, top-down solutions are unlikely to stick. In the medium term, though, there is inevitably going to be uncertainty over the terms of the UK's future settlement with the UK. It is vital that the government moves quickly to reassure the Remainers as well as the Leavers that their views will be taken into account. And in particular, the message needs to go out to scientists and their collaborators in Europe and the UK that we remain firmly open for business and we are a willing and reliable collaborator. If EU research funding is affected during the exit negotiations that follow, the Treasury needs to stand ready to reallocate funds and to support programmes. Our recent report into EU regulation of life sciences pointed out that that sector alone comprises 5,000 companies employing 2,000 people in the UK and generating an annual turnover of 60 billion. I've already raised these issues with the Europe Minister, with Oliver Letwin, and with the Prime Minister, but the Science and Technology Committee will want to look at these issues and the consequences of the Brexit vote for British science, and we'll be discussing this in our meeting this afternoon. But we do not need an inquiry to conclude that we have to shout loudly to ensure that the interests of the British science community are front and centre as this process unfolds, and we have to fight with every fibre of our being to ensure that it stops getting lost in the wider noise of immigration, sovereignty and trade debates. We have to ensure that key and credible voices for science and innovation are at the top table, not only in the negotiations for Brexit, but also in the cabinet of whoever takes over the leadership of our political parties, because science and innovation is going to become ever more important to the success of our knowledge economy. And of course, we have to send the message echoing across the continent and the international community that regardless of this decision, Britain is open for business and remains a science superpower that they are going to have to keep reckoning with. Thank you very much.